My name is Ava Sinclair, and for 7 long years, I allowed the world to believe I was nothing more than an unemployed wife, dependent, quiet, insignificant. My husband, Liam, mocked me publicly, using me as the punchline to entertain his powerful friends. What they never knew was that I was the true founder and owner of the billion-dollar company they thought they controlled. I watched them steal, deceive, and destroy lives until the day I revealed who I really was. And when I did, everything they had collapsed in one strike. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I sat silently at the edge of the table, swirling the dark wine in my glass as the chandelier's reflections shimmered across the red liquid. The sound of laughter bounced off the walls, mixed with the clinking of expensive glasses and the low hum of classical music in the background. I kept my expression soft, almost timid, even as the conversation turned toward me again. Another month without work, Liam chuckled, his lips curling into a smirk. Maybe you should try applying as a cafe assistant this time. Maya. Who knows? Maybe your big break is waiting behind a cash register. He burst into loud laughter, leaning back comfortably in his velvet chair as the 4 men surrounding him joined in. Their laughter was sharp, arrogant, echoing with the confidence of men who believed they owned the world. I lowered my gaze, letting my cheeks warm with false embarrassment. I played the role perfectly, the role I had cultivated and worn for 7 relentless years. The unemployed, dependent wife, the soft-spoken, grateful partner of a man who saved her. They thought they knew me, but they knew nothing, because in just a few hours, every single one of them would lose everything: careers, reputations, wealth, and the power they clung to so desperately. These men in tailored suits, who strutted as though the world bowed at their feet, were senior executives of Luxion Dynamics, one of the most influential tech firms shaping modern innovation. They believed they were the architects of every success the company celebrated. They believed the corporation existed because of their brilliance. But the truth? I was the one who built the empire they sat atop. My name is Ava Sinclair, the founder, principal shareholder, and chief architect of Luxion Dynamics, and the woman Liam just mocked for sport in front of his colleagues. Yes, his wife. When I met Liam, I had made a deliberate choice not to reveal who I truly was. I told him I was a freelance financial consultant, struggling, inexperienced, still trying to break into the industry. I rented a modest apartment instead of staying in my penthouse. I drove a dull, pre-owned sedan instead of my actual limited edition vehicle. I dressed in clean but plain clothing. I carried myself with quiet reserve. In the beginning, Liam seemed gentle, supportive even. But over time, once he convinced himself that I was financially dependent on him, his affection shifted into something darker. Condescension, control, superiority. In his eyes, I was lucky to be his wife, lucky to have someone like him to provide. He thrived in this role, the great husband, the hero, the one who rescued the helpless woman who could never succeed. And tonight, like so many nights, I was nothing more than entertainment, a convenient target to sharpen his ego in front of others. I slowly lifted my glass to my lips and allowed the faintest smile to tug at the corner of my mouth. They didn't know. They didn't know that every promotion they celebrated, I approved. They didn't know that every contract they bragged about closing, I negotiated. They didn't know that every dollar they earned existed because of me. And after tonight, they would never forget who I am, because tomorrow morning, all 5 of them would be removed from Luxion Dynamics permanently. I had been preparing for this for nearly 2 years, quietly collecting evidence, quietly connecting every thread, quietly preparing my strike with precision. Liam and his closest coworkers were not just arrogant, they were corrupt. They forged internal financial reports. They siphoned funds disguised as development expenditures. They held secret meetings with rival corporations. They traded confidential data for personal payoffs. They harassed subordinates and silenced complaints. They believed they were untouchable. They believed no one could ever challenge them because they believed I was powerless. But I wasn't just the owner of the company. I was the architect of the system that tracked every detail. I had designed Luxian's internal data infrastructure myself. They never even suspected that the network they relied on every day was the same network I used to collect every damning secret they thought they had hidden. Emails, text messages, bank transfers, voice recordings, private meeting surveillance. I had it all, but I didn't want to just expose them. I needed to see their arrogance, to witness firsthand the culture they had created, a culture of belittling, diminishing, and destroying anyone they deemed weaker. So I disguised myself. I created a new identity, Nora Hayes, an ordinary woman searching for a chance. I had no connections, no prestige, nothing to offer in their eyes. I applied for an entry-level analyst position at my own company. The interview room was on the 8th floor. I remember walking in wearing a simple gray suit and shoes that were just slightly scuffed, not dirty, just unremarkable. 3 of Liam's closest subordinates sat across from me. Their expressions shifted the moment they scanned my resume. Unemployment, mediocre work history, nothing prestigious. I watched the amusement flicker in their eyes. "You've been out of work for quite a while," one of them commented, tone dripping with condescension. "Yes," I replied softly, steadying my voice. "I've been trying to find a suitable opportunity." The second man murmured, leaning back. "We do receive hundreds of applications from people significantly more qualified than you." I nodded politely. They had already decided. I could tell. I was beneath them. Not worth respect. Not worth acknowledgement. The interview lasted 15 minutes, but only 5 of it involved actual questions. The rest was mocking commentary, inside jokes shared with one another as they pretended I wasn't even in the room. And then their phones buzzed simultaneously. They glanced at the messages and laughed. I didn't need to look. I already knew who had sent it. Liam, mocking me. Again. I left the building quietly that day, my posture timid, my steps small. But inside my chest, I carried certainty. They had revealed exactly who they were. And tomorrow, I would reveal exactly who I am. Tomorrow, I would walk into that same building, not as the desperate applicant they dismissed, but as Ava Sinclair, the owner of Luxian Dynamics. And I would bring everything crashing down. I arrived at the Luxian lobby early the next morning, not sneaking in through a service door or slipping past reception like a quiet roomer, but walking beneath the glass atrium with the same steady stride I used every day when I wanted to be seen. Employees glanced up as I passed, some with curiosity, some with the polite distance that had become habit under the old leadership. Today their expressions were different. There was an electricity in the air that made small things feel larger, as if the building itself had been holding its breath. The boardroom was full. Shareholders, board members, the executive team. Everyone gathered under the deceptive calm of a meeting scheduled to discuss quarterly forecasts. On the massive screen behind the chair, I had cued the files that would tear that calm apart. Spreadsheets annotated with forged entries, bank transfers with thinly veiled descriptions, time-stamped messages between my executives and competitors, and audio clips from private dinners where strategy was traded for personal profit. When Liam and his 4 closest allies entered, they wore the same arrogant composure they always did. It took them a beat to register the change in their surroundings. The same heavy oak table, the same leather chairs, but different faces sitting in seats they had assumed belonged to them forever. When they saw me, their smiles flickered and died. Liam's mouth opened, then closed, his posture betraying a confusion that quickly soured into alarm. "Please have a seat," I said, and my voice had the cool authority that had cost me so many private sacrifices to develop. They sat shoulders stiff, scanning the room for an ally. There was none. The CEO's chair, the one that had been his crowning prize, looked smaller now that he no longer owned it in his head. I did not begin with fury. I began with facts. I let the room watch the screen as transaction after transaction appeared. Evidence the company's accountants would later verify in full. Emails scrolled with proposals that matched bank records. Recordings played of private conversations where strategy and sensitive product roadmaps were discussed with outsiders. I had video of luxury dinners billed as client entertainment, and phone records that traced side deals directly to personal accounts. Then came the accounts from lower-level staff, complaints logged and ignored, HR emails that had been buried, messages showing the systematic silencing of anyone who objected. Their faces changed, red, pale, desperate. Liam swallowed hard, trying to craft the dismissive leadership rhetoric he'd used for years. "This is a setup," he began, but the words died under the weight of the evidence. He looked to his colleagues for corroboration and found only a reflexive avoidance of his eyes. The illusion of solidarity crumbled with every clip that played. "I gave you power," I said plainly, sliding a thick packet of termination paperwork across the table. "I gave you responsibility. I expected stewardship. Instead, you took advantage, enriched yourselves, and destroyed trust. Effective immediately, you are terminated. Your access is revoked. Security will escort you out." The room felt colder. Liam whispered incoherent protests. One by one, their bravado evaporated. They stood, grabbed coats, muttered legal threats, and were led out by security. They had expected me to be a figurehead they could ignore. Instead, I had control of the mechanism that set consequence into motion. In the hall outside, whispers rippled as employees peered through glass, shocked, relieved, uncertain. News traveled faster than I could move. By noon, headlines had begun to appear on industry sites and social feeds. The stock wavered, then steadied as investors scanned the depth of the disclosures and the decisiveness of the board. My intent was not humiliation. It was reform. I could have handed everything directly to regulators and watched them implode, but public rupture alone would not repair the wounds left behind. I needed to reconstruct the company from its foundation: culture, policy, personnel, and purpose. Within days, I convened an all-company meeting. For the first time in years, I addressed the workforce not as a shadow behind a husband's name, but as the founder and steward of the company's future. I spoke about accountability, about ethics, and about the hard work of rebuilding trust. I announced immediate structural changes: an independent compliance office, third-party audits, mandatory ethics training for senior staff, and an anonymous reporting system managed by an impartial external provider so employees could speak without fear. HR underwent a complete overhaul. Anyone complicit in burying complaints was removed. We instituted transparent promotion criteria written plainly and available for anyone to review. But policy without people is paper. I reached back into the ranks to bring back those who had been pushed out or sidelined under the old regime. One call I remember vividly: Leah Park, a brilliant engineer who had been removed from a flagship project because she refused to participate in exclusionary late-night networking rituals. When I told her I wanted her to return, not just as a developer, but to lead a new research unit, there was a long pause heavy with disbelief and relief. "Do you really want me back?" she asked, voice tight. "Yes," I said. "I want you to build something here that lasts." Leah's return was emblematic. Within weeks, dozens of former employees walked back through our doors, some cautiously, others with the bold stride of people who had been validated. Morale shifted. The hallways lost their low-level tension. Meetings regained substantive debate rather than posturing. Teams began to collaborate in ways that produced tangible work rather than the appearance of busyness. Financially, the company's recovery surprised many. Freed from the parasitic behavior of a handful of executives, Luxion began closing deals that had been stalled for months. Long-term partners reached out after seeing our transparency measures. Within a quarter, our financial reports showed not only stabilization, but growth. Investors who had prudently waited re-entered, and the stock regained much of its lost ground. The press, which had gleefully dissected the scandal, now covered the resurrection with a different tone: curiosity, then respect. Profiles praised the rapidity and clarity of the changes, but for me the real victory was quieter. The sight of colleagues smiling without forced civility, of teams launching projects with genuine excitement. As for Liam, his fall was steady and inexorable. The man who once occupied a corner office with city views lost not only his career, but the social scaffolding he'd built around himself. Divorce followed as his personal life unraveled and his friends distanced themselves. I heard, through detached channels, that he took a job stocking shelves at a suburban electronics retailer. An image that felt both petty and perfectly proportionate. There was no gloating in my pleasure. I measured my satisfaction by the company's healing and the safety restored to employees who had feared speaking up. I did not stop at personnel changes. I launched initiatives aimed at long-term cultural health. Mentorship programs pairing senior leaders with junior staff, clear escalation pathways for conflicts, and community forums where employees could suggest policy changes anonymously. Transparency became not a slogan, but a practiced discipline. Quarterly town halls included a digest of compliance findings and status updates on remediation. We published ethics metrics alongside financials. It was radical for a tech company used to secrecy, but it became our new standard. 3 months after the purge, Luxion signed a significant contract with a telecommunications conglomerate that had previously balked at association due to our tainted reputation. Their willingness to partner signaled market confidence. Within 6 months, our revenue charts told a story I dreamed of: sustainable growth built on integrity. The company that rose was not the same one Liam and his circle had exploited. It was more resilient, more principled, and infinitely more humane. Still, not every wound could be fully healed. Lawsuits followed on both sides. Former executives tried to sue to reclaim status. Some employees sought damages for past mistreatment. The legal process was messy, slow, and necessary. I let the facts speak in court as they had in the boardroom. The paper trail, the recordings, the testimony. When courts ruled in our favor, it only reinforced the message that misuse of power carries consequence. At night, when the building lights dimmed and the city quieted, I sometimes walked the corridors alone. The emptiness was not lonely anymore. It was a space of calm I had earned through toil. I thought of the small sacrifices that had made the coup possible, the intentional modesty that had blinded a man to his wife's capabilities, the patient assembling of proof, the lonely nights planning the logistics to avoid any hint of impropriety. I thought of the people who had been hurt along the way, and the weight of responsibility to restore them, not with promises, but with opportunity. Business recovered, reputation healed. But the deeper change, the hardest and most vital, was that Luxion became a place where dignity mattered again, where competence, not cronyism, advanced careers, where innovation was measured by impact rather than expense accounts. The victory was not merely personal, it was institutional. And in that I found a kind of peace that no public humiliation could have given me. 6 months after the purge, I could finally breathe without feeling the old tension coil behind my ribs. Luxion hummed with a steadier rhythm. Projects launched because they were ready, not because someone needed a headline. Budgets held because discipline had replaced vanity. I'd begun visiting teams without an entourage, showing up at stand-ups and whiteboard sessions to listen rather than direct. People looked surprised the first few times, then pleased, then comfortable. The building that once broadcast intimidation now felt like a place where real work, lived. The board had asked me more than once whether I wanted to appoint a public-facing CEO and step back into anonymity. I told them no. I had hidden long enough. I could lead without making myself the center of every narrative. Presence didn't have to mean performance. I kept a small office with glass walls near the middle floors instead of the penthouse. Visibility mattered more than altitude. When I walked the halls, I met eyes. When I made decisions, I explained the why. It took longer. It paid dividends. There were days when old anger rose uninvited, a ghost in my mouth, but I trained myself to set it down. I wasn't interested in living tethered to someone else's choices. I measured my progress by different milestones now, and in turn challenging a director without flinching, a new parent able to step away at 4 p.m. without defensiveness, a junior developer who shipped a fix and received recognition without knowing the right dinner party to attend. Revenge, I learned, is a door you close behind you, not a room you stay in. Still, closure has a way of asking you to meet it halfway. Mine arrived on a gray Saturday in late autumn when I walked into an electronics store looking for a travel adapter. The bell over the door chimed. The place smelled like plastic wrap and dust, and the faint sweetness of bottled hand cleaner. And there he was, Liam, standing under fluorescent lighting in a navy polo shirt with a lanyard badge clipped to his pocket. For a second, neither of us moved. Then recognition washed over his face. He straightened as if posture could retrieve status. "Ava," he said, testing my name like he hadn't earned the right to say it. "It's been a while." I kept my voice even. "Hello, Liam." Silence pressed around us, broken only by the tinny music overhead and the murmur of another customer arguing about a warranty. I could have turned and left. I could have struck at him with words sharpened for the moment. Instead, I set the small package on the counter. He rang it up with hands that shook. "I didn't know you came to places like this," he said, the old sarcasm walking toward the edge of his mouth, then stumbling and falling before it could land. "I thought you sent people." "I do most things myself now," I said. "It keeps me honest." His eyes darted past me toward the door and back. The arrogance that used to float on his face had sunk, leaving the outline of someone I barely recognized. "You ruined me," he whispered, each syllable thin and brittle. "You could have handled it privately. You wanted me to suffer." "I wanted the truth to exist in daylight," I replied. "You did the rest yourself." He flinched, like the words were more than he could carry. "I'm trying to get back," he said, near pleading. "No one will touch me. I was stupid, but I wasn't the only one." "No," I said, "you weren't alone. That's why the house fell when I kicked at the base." He handed me the receipt. For a second our fingers nearly touched. "Do you ever think about us?" he asked, barely audible. "About who we were before." I met his eyes. "Yes," I said. "I think about the woman I pretended to be, so you could feel large, and I think about the man you chose to become once you felt you'd won." He swallowed. "I loved you," he said, and the way he said it sounded like he believed it. "You loved the story," I answered. "You loved being the hero in a play I wrote for you. That is not the same thing." The register beeped. The moment ended. I thanked him, took the bag, and left. Outside, the air felt clean and simple. I stood for a while on the sidewalk, watching my breath vanish into the gray. I did not cry. I did not smile. I simply walked back to my car, closed the door, and let the quiet hold me. Back at Luxion, the work deepened. Our AI research group, led by Leah, released a prototype that turned out to be the spine of a new product line, an interpretability layer that let clients audit model decisions in human terms rather than black box assurances. It was the sort of tool our old leadership would have dismissed as unnecessary because it didn't glitter. Now it was our signature. Transparency as technology, not just policy. We licensed it instead of hoarding it, insisted on clear documentation, and built ethical constraints into the default settings rather than burying them behind toggles no one could find. For once, we were out in front for the right reasons. The mentorship program grew next. Senior engineers took on cohorts of junior staff, not to decorate their own resumes, but to carry specific goals forward. Promotions were documented in clear language anyone could read. I instituted a practice I stole from a friend in medicine, a weekly morbidity and mortality meeting translated for software. Once a week, we took apart a mistake, walked through how it happened, and determined exactly what about our system allowed it to exist. No shame, no theater, just the ordinary heroism of telling the truth. None of this erased the past, but each practice put distance between then and now. The company's numbers validated the change, but what mattered to me were the intangibles, that people lingered after meetings to hash out ideas because the room felt safe, that when I asked for dissent, I got it, that when someone new joined, they understood our terms on day one.